Hello, and welcome back to another episode of my devlog. So this sprint, as I promised, was heavily art-centric. Actually, it was only art that I worked on the entire sprint, and I got a lot of work done. I'm actually pretty happy with what I got done. Before I jump into the body of work I got done this sprint, I want to take a look at the houses we have so far. So you see that we have this primary house that you've seen before, and then this church building that I made, I think, in the previous sprint. You'll notice there's a little plaque on the front. I don't think I talked about that in the last sprint. And it turned out actually a lot bigger than I thought. This is my first time walking around it, and it's actually pretty big. Hopefully I have a lot of space to work with inside when I start making the interior. And then this little house that I whipped up one night during last sprint. And then I wanted to mention, at the beginning of the sprint, I also kind of cleaned up this broken down house and made a repaired version of it. Just something simple. Since I had already made this over here, I was like, well, it's not a lot of work to just make a small house that I can put in the village. Oh, and I should also mention I've added these windows to the bottom floors of my buildings. I noticed, especially when making this one over here, that it was looking a little bland and there was absolutely no windows. Not sure why I didn't add windows to the bottom floors of these buildings, but I went back and just copied and pasted these windows haphazardly in here, and I think they look good. I think they add some complexity to the actual buildings, and will hopefully add some realism since they'll let in light when I implement lighting into the game. But these buildings wasn't the bulk of the work this sprint. So without further ado, let's hop over to a good old time lapse and we can start looking over what I actually worked on. So this sprint, I finally got to work on the scene that is my deliverable for the end of the year. I just want some test kind of scene, a little village that I can really go to town with all of the different things that I've put into the game, the different art pieces, and the game mechanics. So I started sketching out a little scene right here. I didn't go too crazy with trying to automate any of this, which made it take a lot longer than it could have had a lot of this process been automated. But I'm basically, as you could see early on, I was just coloring in some areas, not worrying about the colors themselves, just trying to get a basic idea of the layout of the world, or of this scene, this test scene that I'm going to have by the end of the year. And now I'm starting to block in the actual pieces of that scene. Again, I'm not worrying about colors right now. I'm just trying to get a layout, because after this, I'm going to move it over to Unity and I can walk around in it and get a feel if I'm going in the right direction or not. Again, obviously these colors are pretty bad, but I changed them in a second. Now this scene is going to be important down the road because it's really going to allow me to flex my muscles with all of the different game mechanics and artwork that I'm going to have, and primarily it's going to give me something I can hand to testers. So friends and family, I can just give them this scene, let them play around with it, comment on the feel of the game, what they like, what they dislike, so I can have a better direction of where I need to go in the next year. Obviously, we've still got a couple months before the end of the year, but I wanted to get a head start on this because it is a pretty big project, and all of this work took many, many hours. We're not going to go through the entire time lapse because that would take too long. I tried to speed it up, but it would still take a very long time. So at this point, I'm just adding in the paths, as you can see right here. And once I've added in the paths, I'm going to bring it over into Unity and kind of walk around. And that was one thing that I loved about this process. It really let me be able to feel what it would be like playing this as I was working on the art. I could make a small change and immediately just hop over into Unity and walk around in the scene and see if I liked it or not. And more often than not I did, but often it would be like, I like that, but I need to make a couple changes. So this felt really good to be able to just quickly do that. And I should mention the whole idea of being able to quickly change it as I'm making the level is not obviously original, but it's done by the big game studios, the AAA titles out there. They're all made by game or level designers who are just quickly rapid prototyping their scene, making something super blocky, the colors are all wrong and everything, dropping it into an early version of the game, walking around and seeing if it flows properly. So you can see me doing that right now. I'm setting up the scene, making sure that I have the character working in it, And then once I get it working, I just walk around and see if I like the feel, like the size of the world. Do the paths feel good? Do the that little area in the forest, is it the right size? So I'm just walking around. I like the feel of it, but I add that path. It's kind of flying by real quickly, but I do add a path there because I'm like, I find myself walking over here, so I'm just feeling it out at that point. Here, I changed the colors. I wish I had a very scientific method of how I changed those colors. I just added in colors I liked. Generally gave the game a much brighter feel because it was so dark and drab previously. And then I start working on the actual detail of the tiles themselves. You saw in the previous step where I was making it a tiled game, and now I'm actually working on the tiles that I'll be able to copy and paste in the step after this. Now, full disclosure, this little image that I just made in the 16 by 16 tile, it's only sort of original. I watched a YouTube video on how to make this bank image, and I really liked what they did, so I did something very similar. And in the past, I would feel bad about this. Like, I would go to YouTube, I would watch some videos on art, and then I would basically make the exact same thing that they did. I mean, it's a 16 by 16 grid. There's not a lot of opportunity for variation, and I would just feel bad about making something that looked very similar to something else someone had already made. Like, is this original if it looks so similar? And I finally came to the conclusion, it's not a bad thing if my thing looks similar to someone who's been doing this for years and years. This is a good place to start. Ultimately, it's not copy and paste, and I'm learning as I go along. And as you can see, the video only covered that first tile I made. But now I'm able, because I understood what the video was showing, to extend it into a full tile set with these corners, and as you'll see later, with top tiles, with the bank on the bottom of the image and the water at the top. So I would encourage other people who are kind of new to the art that they're implementing into their game, or just any art that they're getting into, feel free to watch YouTube videos, and if your art turns out very, very similar to what you're seeing, that's a good thing. Obviously, you shouldn't be watching a video and then having something completely different. You probably didn't learn anything from the video. It should look very similar. And then as I go along, you'll see I kind of learn and expand from what I watch. So that's a good thing. Not a bad thing for art to look similar to what people are making who know what they're doing. I just wanted to throw that out there because it was kind of learning for me. As I've approached this game, I've wanted to do stuff completely unique. I've wanted to make everything my own. I didn't want it to just look or feel like anything else. I haven't tried to download or just copy paste code from the internet. I've always wanted it to be my stuff. But I need to be a bit more humble than that. And even though I'm making all of this, I need to be happy, content with the fact that it's going to be similar to things that have been made before. This art style is not intended to be original. I mean, it's kind of retro. It's 16 by 16 pixels. It's minimum color palette. It's supposed to be based on what other people have made before me. That's okay, and I need to be okay with that. So here I am, I've kind of completed or done the most part of completing this tile set with the tiles I need. I didn't go ahead and create more tiles than was necessary, so as I kind of went along, I would create tiles as needed. But yeah, this was basically the process for the next week and a half of me just making tiles and then putting them throughout the world. And then hopping into Unity and seeing what it looked like. Did I like it or not? And then just adding more and more tiles, fleshing out this scene. We're not going to go through the entire time lapse because it's a very, very long time lapse, but this is basically the process. So now that we've seen a good bit of this, let's hop over and see what the actual product looks like. All right, so here we are in the new world. Let's hop around and see what it looks like. You'll notice the path is from the previous world, but everything else, or the previous scene, but everything else is new. We've got these bridges that are a little green. They're made out of wood here, and then we've got this dead grass for the village itself. If we follow the path up here, you'll see the nice short grass leading into the darker, perhaps shaded and longer grass that's in the woods. And I did keep with the map shape, so if I come up here, you'll see that there's a little clearing up here that the path feeds into. all of these little blades of grass everywhere, and I think this looks a lot cleaner than the grass I was having before. If you've been watching all my videos, you know early on I was really struggling with making good looking grass for my video game. It was just kind of an eyesore and way too much. And so I've really dialed it back and made this basic, just singular color with some complexity on the edges and then some basic leaves placed around. I made just a few, like a handful of different leaf tiles, and I just spread them all over the place and made them more dense in the long grass than in the short grass. And I think it really, it just makes things feel a lot cleaner. I can walk around and my eyes aren't hurting when the character moves. I will say I feel like I could sprinkle a bit more leaves around, or grass around in the shorter grass, but that's nothing. I mean, obviously the work is done. I can just add it in. But this is what we've got, and I think it gives me a lot of space to work with. So I can really get playing around with outside of the town in the woods. I can put something up in the clearing up there, maybe even caves, and you change scenes going into the cave. But I can put some buildings in here. Buildings are a little big. I don't know how I'm going to fit this in the space. I didn't really think of that too much, but I guess we'll figure that out on the next sprint. But I have a lot of space right here, so I can put maybe a church or a bigger building here and stuff over here. I also have the clearing in this area that I can maybe make a farmhouse and some crops, maybe play around with some crop farming mechanics, but probably not this year. Later, that's for later. And yeah, and then I've also got areas where you could have a fisherman that you could talk to or something. I will say, these paths, like I said, they're copy and pasted from the previous scene, and they definitely don't work. They're very dark because the old color palette for the game, or the colors I was using, was very dark, and they're very complex. Like, these got these really harsh repeating patterns that, again, just don't match the aesthetic for this world. I was feeling lazy, and I was thinking maybe the path will work, but I think it's safe to say it really doesn't. It's also very orange. I didn't realize how orange it was until it's in this much brighter green and tan environment. But these paths are very harsh, don't work with the world at all, and I think are kind of ugly. So they're going to go. I didn't want to worry about them right now, but I was hoping they would grow on me. They haven't. But that's what we have right now. So in the next sprint, I will place the houses in here, probably make some new houses, change out this path, really block out the buildings. I'm probably going to start off with blocking out, just like I did for the ground, blocking out buildings, walking around them, getting a feel for it, and we'll see where we go with that. Right now there's no collision. I may add some collision, but next sprint will probably be very art heavy as well. I want to keep rolling with this flow that I have of creating this new world, and we can get back to the programming and game mechanics and game design and pixel gen. Don't forget about pixel gen. We can do all that later on this year. So that's where we are right now. I'm really looking forward to getting further on with this little scene we have in preparation for the end of the year. I like where we're going, and we'll see how it goes in the next sprint. If you like this video, go ahead and like it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.